on creativity for any audience. I'm so glad you could join us today, and I hope you take back something meaningful from this session. My name is Lasha, and I'm an instructional design manager with Lionbridge. Over the past decade, I have experienced numerous learning projects do wonders but also fail. And my attempt today is to give you a sneak peek into the world of gaming as an instructional strategy. And you may agree, 30 minutes by no means is enough to even scratch the surface of gaming in the e-learning industry. In this webinar, we'll talk about what e-learning is, the origin of gaming as a medium, gamification versus game-based learning. We then look at when a game design fails and Lionbridge's approach and capability in the game design space. And what better place to start than right at the beginning? You may find this interesting that while most of us believe the internet brought about the paradigm shift in the fundamental way people learned, the first instance of what we today actually call online learning can be traced back to 1960, when the internet was not even invented. Yes, you heard me right. The internet was not yet invented. This was at the University of Illinois, USA. Students began learning from computer terminals that were interlinked to form a network. And there you go. The first ever completely online course was offered in 1984 by the University of Toronto. 3 years later, the University of Phoenix became the first educational institution in the world to launch a wholly online collegiate institution, offering both bachelor's and master's degree. By the end of 1990s, the Open University in Britain was one of the first universities in the world to begin online distance learning. What a concept. Today, the Indira Gandhi National University in India is the largest university in the world with around 4 million students enrolled, most of whom currently receive education online. According to Global Market Insights e-learning research report, the e-learning market size surpassed 200 billion USD in 2019 and is anticipated to grow at over 8% compound annual growth rate between 2020 and 2026, taking the e-learning market to 375 billion USD by 2026. Now that's the landscape we're talking about. While several game-based learning or GBL studies begin in the era of Tetris and Pac-Man, they're limited to digital learning games. Whereas the concept of games in an educational and training context originated way before the board games, like Kalaha or Chinese chess. Other forms of educational games for training, strategic and tactical thinking, language skills, math, and other subjects have also been around for eons. Games and game-based learning were well-known ideas in ancient Greece and during the Roman Empire. The oldest African board games were built more than 5,000 years ago. Numerous game-based research findings indicate the view of games and game-based learning varies between epochs. However, the idea of complementing theoretic and abstract concepts with concrete and motivating play seems to have had a constant value. A concept that for several reasons can be even more important in contemporary, technology-enhanced mass learning landscapes such as ours. So then by definition, what is a game really? As a noun, it's an activity that engages in for amusement or fun. As an adjective, it is defined showing eagerness or willingness to do something new or challenging. And as a verb, it is defined by manipulation of a situation, typically in a way that is unfair or unscrupulous. These definitions reveal a common theme of motivation, intrinsic motivation. This is when we do something without any obvious external rewards because it's enjoyable and interesting, rather than because of an outside incentive or pressure, or reward or a deadline. Although Aristotle's concept of autotelism seems to anticipate modern ideas of intrinsic motivation, it was Plato who first truly gave games and play a place in learning. Aristotle and many other early educators tended to view games and learning as opposites, not very different from today's L&D seen in some companies. As most of you may already be aware that despite of this, Plato explicitly recommended games and play as a tool for instruction, and his ideas were taken up during Renaissance. This inspired other modern philosophers like Piaget, who envisioned learning and play and games to be truly integrated. I'm sure you'll agree that in today's broader context, both intrinsic and extrinsic motivation are necessary for any game design to be successful. How then should we approach our game design? Before we get into the heart of game design, I'd like to address a common misconception between game-based learning and gamification. Game-based e-learning, unlike e-learning gamification, is not about including game elements to non-game contexts. Instead, the game itself is the foundation and the training content is tapestried into it. So for instance, asking the learners to drag and drop their choices or choose from a predefined set of options can be dressed as a game. It does not technically qualify as a game learning though. Let me paint a picture for you. Say you manage a large team and I give you a scenario, and with each option, it either takes you to being a more popular and successful manager or makes your team members disgruntled. On the surface, this does sound like a game, but when you strip the visuals, is it really a game? Ask any game designer, and they'll tell you the 5 elements of game design are mechanics, space, goals, rules, and components. Say you're able to nail these 5 elements. Does that ensure a successful outcome? Well, maybe, maybe not. And there are various reasons for a game design to fail. Let's look at a few. Motivators, which means creating meaningful experiences. It is important to check our motivators. I once caught my preschooler failing at a basic online educational game. The game's mascot was a parrot. He'd smile with its teeth showing for every correct response, and he'd squawk and shed its feather with every incorrect response. Clearly, my daughter knew the correct responses. It's just that she enjoyed the squawking parrot more. Corporate games can sometimes look ham-fisted, with a clumsy array of point systems, badges, leaderboards, and fail to create any real meaning or relevance for the learner. Sadly, most of the motivation provided by games has very little bearing on their real life. A blog explains this very eloquently. Think about some of the corporate games you've seen. Firefighters don't save people from burning buildings for 200 digital hats. Soldiers can't heal their wounds with a beverage. And we've all seen these kind of motivators. Another one is difficulty level. It is vital to keep your audience in mind when designing a game, and competency proficiency scales are a good way to keep the training focused. At the same time, it is important to understand that games offer short-term productivity gains rather than long-term benefits. When designing games, be especially mindful not to trivialize serious issues. For example, when creating games on road safety or mine operations, remember, sometimes the best intentions can backfire. Having said that, when common pitfalls are considered and game mechanics are carefully implemented, games can be designed to bring real learning, fun and meaning, and motivation to the workplace. At Lionbridge, we custom create each game based on the client's specific requirement. We use the ADDIE model for our instructional system design. During the analysis phase, we check if requirements have been accurately captured and articulated for us, or if there is more information that we need. It is very common for us to conduct a need diagnostic study in this phase to ensure the game objective is in line with the client's goal. We then begin work on a few concepts and wireframes. A team of instructional designers and graphic visualizers brainstorm different concepts and share it with the client to give their inputs. Based on the design chosen by the client, we begin to work on wireframes and begin building the engine. We then create a prototype and run it through our testing team. At Lionbridge, we pride in having a fully functional in-house testing team for all kinds of gaming needs. We also understand that because of the nature of the content and the line of business of the client, we are sometimes expected to use the client's testing team instead, who we are always more than happy to collaborate with. Once the prototype is implemented and evaluated, we address the feedback. This marks the beginning of the actual game creation. We have a large team of experts around the world and collaborate on various elements of the game. This is what a typical life cycle for a game design looks like at Lionbridge. Once the objective is defined, it becomes the plumb line for the team and other game elements are created accordingly. During each phase of the project life cycle, we have our eyes on the plumb line. And the categorization of the learning objective is always at the heart of all design decisions. Now that you have all the elements of a good game design in place, does that ensure success? Despite the growing interest in the effectiveness of game-based learning, there is a lack of empirical evidence on the effectiveness because of the outcome measures of assessing effectiveness, varying methods of data collection, and inconclusive or difficult to interpret results. In order to be able to measure the actual success of a game-based design, a combination of cognitive, motivational, affective, and socio-cultural perspectives is necessary for both game design and game research. And there is no one overarching or integrated evaluation tool for game-based learning today. This is a space still being explored. So while the evaluation of success is not in our hands, ensuring we cover the 5 basic game elements and are mindful of integrated design strategies will ensure we design and build incredible games that people can enjoy and learn from. I wish you the very best in your journey as a digital game designer. I hope you enjoyed this webinar. Thank you so much for your time.